interact with folks outside your department, that really is true. And it's a big part of the Carolina experience. I think an obvious next question for our panel is, well, what advice would you offer this incoming class, knowing that they're coming in at a very unique time in our history, one that hopefully will be very, very different next fall? And so I might throw that back to you to get us started on that conversation, Bill.
Very timely question, because actually we're going to have orientation for our students on Friday. So I want to tell the broader graduate students something I always tell my students, which I'm going to tell them Friday morning, is around time management. Time flies when you're in graduate school. And I know it doesn't seem like right now as you're beginning, but you're going to look up, and in a blink of an eye, a year is going to be gone. In another blink, 2 years is going to be gone. So I would not only encourage the ones who are listening this afternoon to think about not only what they want to accomplish this semester, and start thinking about putting the calendar out, looking at the syllabi, what has got to be accomplished this semester, but what needs to be accomplished over the next 2, 3, 4 years, your time in graduate school, because it is going to come at you very quickly. And determining what you want to get accomplished during that time period and thinking about that now, I think is extremely important. It's a great question.
Thanks, Bill. Pat, would you like to chime in on that one?
Sure. Following that great advice from Bill, and hello, Bill, it's good to see you. I used to see you more regularly when we were on that on the board together for the graduate school academic policy board. The thing that the one thing I would add to what Bill shared is this: trust yourself. You belong here. That's one thing. That's the one, that's one sentence there, or one phrase, one piece of advice. And the reason I say that is that it was some advice that my brother gave me that bode well for me when I was entering into graduate school, the PhD program at the University of Texas at Austin. Angela and I were separate for a few years, if not a decade or so in terms of our time there, but nevertheless, we're both alumni. And he, I had some trepidation going in, and I already had my master's degree. I was going into the doctoral program, and he asked me this question. He said, "Well, wait, you have a graduate degree already, right?" I said, yes, I do. And the implication of his question is, so you already know that you can do graduate school, so why not trust yourself there? And so I would give that same advice to you, that you've met you have the credentials to be here. And so trust yourself that you belong here, that you can do this work. And I don't know where messages to the contrary may come, but they should not come from you. Don't second guess yourself, and take that confidence into your interactions. And then the next piece of advice I would give is to ask questions, and someone else may probably elaborate on that. But I think that if you don't know something, just ask good questions, and ask people. If you don't know whom to ask, find out who's the person I should ask this question to. So those are the two pieces of advice that I would give.
Thanks so much, Pat. Angela, I wonder how you would answer this question.
Well, I am happy to go after Pat, because that was also my main message. You belong here. We are so lucky to have you here, and you are worthy. I remember what it feels like to be a first year in a first year of graduate school, and people are like, throwing jargon around and totally talking above your head. But you are going to get there. And if you put in the hard work and look for the resources you need and ask the questions you need, like Dr. Parker says, you're going to do just fine. And I think that this message is especially important for non-traditional students, right? For people who maybe have taken a different path to graduate school, for BIPOC students, for students who maybe didn't go to top tier undergraduate institutions. UNC needs you, and there is a place for you here. And we're really happy that you've joined us.
Thank you, Angela. Bob, what would you say?
I liked everything I heard so far. Maybe I could extend from that by from the point of knowing that you belong here and having the self-confidence that Pat and Angela were referring to, and the time management skills that Bill was referring to. Because one of the pitfalls is the how much freedom you have in graduate school. But what I tell my students a lot now, and I tell my own children this who are going through postgraduate training or graduate training, is to focus on process, not outcome. And so you are here to get a terminal degree. Presumably most of you will be PhDs or other types of terminal degrees. But that will come if you focus on the process, because you do belong here. You have the skills to succeed. So focus on the process, not the outcome. I talk to so many graduate students who are worried about when they're going to get the degree and they think their life's going to begin after they get the degree. I tell them that you're living your life now, and being in graduate school is exercising your career, and you're learning how to be a professional. And so focus on that process, and the outcome will come. You'll get your degree, you'll get your job along the way, and that will keep you in the moment and focusing on what you're doing instead of worrying about the long term. That's not to say you shouldn't plan and you shouldn't think about things like Bill alluded to. That's not what I'm saying, but the process is what's important, and learning how to be a graduate student and navigating it. And if you do that correctly with hard work and applying all the skills that you have, the outcome that you want will be there.
Thank you, Bob. And finally, Shelley, what are your thoughts on this?
Of course, I'd echo everything my colleagues said. And then I think the one I would add is a reminder to practice self-care, that graduate school is, while it can go by very quickly, it is both a long-term deal, and it is also the place where you sometimes set the patterns that sort of hold even beyond graduate school as well. And so, you know, we're super excited you're here at UNC, but you are not only graduate students, you are people. And the important things in your life are going to be the things that also sustain you through some of the challenges. So finding the time for whatever it is that you do to sustain yourself, whether that's spend time with family, whether that is, read for fun, whether that is exercise, whatever it is that might sort of help keep you going, it's important to sort of maintain those efforts towards self-care while you're in the midst of all of this. And I think that's probably extra important given the times that we're living through.
Thank you, Shelley. And thanks to all of you for answering that question. There's so many questions I want to ask you guys. I think what I'm going to do with the next question is throw it out and just let a couple of people chime in if they'd like to answer. Then this is prompted by something that you've said, this issue of imposter syndrome and do I belong? Perseverance is an essential skill for any journey, especially in graduate school. And I wonder if anyone would be willing to share maybe an obstacle or a challenge you overcame during graduate school and how you persevered, what it took to get around that obstacle, and how you ultimately came to stay in graduate school and come to be where you are now. Would anyone feel comfortable sharing on that line? Just unmute and share, please.
Susan, I don't mind throwing something out if that's okay. Yeah, I think one of the things, you do belong here, and unfortunately, you're probably going to encounter some what I would call negative noise along the way. And please don't let that negative noise impact you. You belong here, and you want to stay focused on what you're ultimately trying to accomplish. Quick little war story here. I know when I was in graduate school wanting to go to pursue my PhD, I had several professors to say, Bill, a PhD is not for you. Finally, I found a professor that says, Bill, you would be a wonderful PhD and a wonderful professor. In moving through some of that negative noise and remaining positive about yourself and putting people around you who are going to be positive, I think is fundamental to success.
Thanks for sharing that, Bill. Would anybody else like to share on that question?
Well, I think the perseverance issue is important, and that is one of the main skills. And I would say, certainly my field, probably all of our fields, we get rejected more than we get accepted in terms of submitting publications, submitting grants. in my experimental science field, experiments fail all the time. And that's something you hear over and over again from students. And so I've learned to deal with that. That doesn't mean that I don't still feel pain when I get rejected, but I've learned that, again, if I focus on the process and I re-engage, that over the long term, it will come out okay. I tell a real quick anecdote of my early graduate career when I didn't know how to do experiments, and I was learning how to do stuff in the lab. And I was trying to do a particular experiment, and it kept failing over and over. And it was like one of my first ones, and I couldn't go past and further my project until I got that done. And I was talking to one of my friends who was a little older than me in graduate school. And he said, and I was complaining about this didn't work, that didn't work. And I didn't have the answer I wanted. And he said, well, you know, Bob, you just keep doing it. When the experiment works, you'll get your answer. And I hadn't thought about that before. And one day it did work. I got it to work and I got my answer and I moved on. And so I was focusing on the process there, but not the right way, because I really wanted, again, I was thinking about the outcome and the answer and I didn't have it. And so it was a lesson in perseverance. It was figure it out and then you'll have what you need and then you can move on. So sometimes we can't see past the immediate obstacle in front of us, and you will get past that, and then there'll be other obstacles, and you'll go forward. And so, little successes and taking confidence in little successes is really helpful for developing the perseverance of going forward.
Thanks for sharing that.
May I add one last one? I'm not sure how many, but
Sure.
you know, I'm really encouraged by hearing my male colleagues share stories that I typically hear from women in terms of people telling you that you can't, you shouldn't go to that next level and so forth, and hearing those. I love what you said, Bill, the negative noise. So typically, as I said, these are, and if you look at the research, these are stories that you hear from women, from people of color, Indigenous faculty or an Indigenous student. And what I would add to that, the perspective I would add is that, these structures are real. Systemic and institutional bias is real, and that sometimes the pathway forward for BIPOC faculty can take, sort of some different routes. And so I'll give an example. In my case, whenever I encountered negative noise, I'm just going to use Bill's language and also refer to something that Bob said, and that is, and I would seek someone who could give me a way forward. I wasn't looking for somebody who would tell me what I wanted to hear. I just needed to know, to have a pathway forward. Sometimes that's in your department. Sometimes it's outside of your department. Sometimes it's outside the institution. So I think this may be sort of bleeding into one of the other questions that we're going to talk about in terms of mentorship. Have a wide circle of people that can tell you the truth, that can tell you, help you to work out for yourself how to find that pathway forward. And I think that's so true for BIPOC students in particular, and women students as they face some of the structures that may be exclusionary.
Thanks, Pat. And you really did anticipate the next question I wanted to ask. I imagine we would all agree that success in graduate school really does rely on effective and caring and sometimes mentoring that provides you with what you need to hear and not just what you want to hear. And so I wonder if any of you have advice for our incoming students in terms of how do they select a good mentor? How do they find a good advisor?
Well, I might take the singular off of that. I think to follow something Pat just said is that you should find multiple mentors. I mean, there are people who are officially sort of in a mentoring role, but no one mentor can be everything to all students. And, you're best served, I think, by having a variety of mentors. And so I think finding that kind of mentorship may mean reaching out to people, which is not always comfortable for everybody. But I think for the most part, my experience at Carolina is that people actually do want to hear from students. And so as long as you find the way that they want to be reached out to, people are pretty open to that. Pay attention in class to guest lectures or to, faculty in different places and what kind of work they do, and think about where there may be intersections with your interests. And then, ask to talk to somebody, even just for 15 minutes, just to say, I'm interested, limit that so that you're not, papering your entire faculty with requests for that, but think strategically about that and the different things that are of interest to you, and find people who can mentor those different pieces. And that includes the skills you want to build, but also sort of the type of faculty person or the type of professional you want to be down the line. Look for people who have those kind of similar skills, and then sort of talk to them about their career paths and how they ended up where they did.
Thanks for that wonderful advice. And by the way, everybody, Shelley was the 2021 recipient of our Faculty Award for Excellence in Doctoral Mentoring. And we thank her for all she's done to support graduate students. Would anyone else like to provide a bit of advice in terms of finding mentors and advisors?
I can build on Shelley's. First of all, congratulations, Shelley. That's amazing. What an accomplishment and what a recognition. I agree. I'm thinking about how different mentors and advisors give you different things. So, I had an advisor in graduate school who gave me really incisive, sharp feedback on my work. This person did not have time. We were not shooting the breeze. We were not talking about how my life was going, but I was getting such important feedback on my work. And then there were other people, right, who expressed an interest in how I was doing and connecting on different levels. So I think you'll find different things in different people, but overall, I think you want to find mentors who show interest in you and your work, who make the time to meet with you and to provide feedback, and who help you make connections, right? Connections to ideas, right? To concepts in your field, also to people on and off campus, and to opportunities, whether that be funding opportunities, fellowship opportunities, research opportunities. Those are the jobs of your advisors and mentors, and they should never be making you feel little for asking for their time.
Thank you, Angela. That's really, really helpful. And if I could just add something, also remember that mentors come in all kinds of, they don't necessarily look like you. They don't necessarily share your lived experience. They come to you in all sorts of ways. It might be an instructor in a course. It might be somebody that you meet when you're having coffee out on the quad. It could be your major professor. The long and the short of it is mentors are all around you, and you're ultimately going to benefit from having a mentoring team, as has been mentioned. Well, I'd like to throw it open to some questions from the audience. And I believe somebody's going to help me identify some of those.
If I may I just add a plug for
Sure.
the Team Advance, which is the National Science Foundation grant that I was a part of. I'm a part of that team that's on this campus, and our focus is on mentoring. And what I want to say, it's for mentoring faculty. So one piece of advice for graduate students might be to ask their faculty advisors, for example, or their chair, if they have had training in mentoring. And that could be one of your ways. And I know that can be a little intimidating to say, are you good enough to be my mentor? But the idea is that there are lots of resources out there to be a good mentor, and not everyone is a good mentor. And so that might be one clue. Folks who've participated in the Team Advance training could be, I would say, would be a good bet as a mentor. Thank you for letting me have that plug.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. And we're developing some additional resources to help faculty to train to hone their skills to be outstanding mentors to graduate students. Thanks for putting in that plug. So let's pull in some questions from the audience. Does somebody want to feed me a question? What's the first one we'd like to start with?
Do you see that in the chat, Suzanne? I can read it, or you're welcome to. Elizabeth posted it.
Okay. What advice can you give to a clueless new graduate student who doesn't know what to expect from graduate school or from research? Would like to jump in on that one.
I think I want to elaborate on this issue of time going by quickly. I think one of the best pieces of advice that I can give is to be organized, right? And I think to try to, you don't have a sense of, it sounds like this question is like, I don't have a sense of the big picture, but you are going to start getting pieces, right? You're going to get pieces of the picture from your program and from your different instructors, and you've got to be able to keep a lot of pieces or a lot of balls in the air. And so get yourself a planner, whether you're using, an online calendar or something on paper, and keep track of those small pieces. And I would say, like, calendar out your time over the course of your program, over the course of the semester, and then even like down to how you're spending your days.
Thanks, Angela. Anyone else want to offer some advice to the clueless new graduate student?
Sure. First of all, you're not clueless. You have lots of skills and lots of perspective that you need to apply. And so I'll address the part of the question that said what to research. I'm a bit of an idealist, and my answer comes from that perspective. In my field, at least, I don't think it matters what you research in terms of it being a topic and practically applicable or anything. I think what you want to think about is what interests you the most, and you want to have fun during graduate school. You're here studying something that is a particular interest to you because you've narrowed down your interest to get to this point. And so what you research needs to be important to you. And then your job is to exercise that curiosity and develop a project and then sell it to the world, right? So you want to be in control of what you're researching and what you're doing. So finding an advisor that lets you do that is a piece of that. Understanding what really gets you motivated. And I talk to students a lot about knowing what motivates you. So I'm in biomedical research, but I'm not in that because I want to cure disease per se. I care about disease and it affects me like it affects all of you. But I'm in this because I'm curious about how biology works, how cells work, and that's what motivates me. And so I think finding out what motivates you, what gets you excited, it will allow you to have fun in graduate school and will direct you to the research. And there's many ways you can go down that path and all kinds of different things that you could study within your field.
Thanks, Bob. Anyone else want to share on that question? I might add one thing, and that is you can learn a lot from senior graduate students. So I think talking to students in your department, in your program, even talking to students in other programs can be really helpful. One way to get to know other students around campus is to come to some of the professional development activities we have here in the graduate school. You'll be getting notifications about them throughout the semester, throughout the year. And I hope you'll consider using them as an opportunity to broaden your network, get to know other people, and ultimately learn from them. I think they too will help you with the transition to graduate school. Another question has come in, and it has to do with something that's super important right now in particular, and that is setting priorities. There's so much going on in the world right now. There's so much uncertainty, and between the uncertainty that's inherent in one's personal life right now and the challenges of transitioning to graduate school, what advice would you give new graduate students on how to prioritize things and how to basically prevent themselves from becoming overwhelmed?
Suzanne, I'll respond to that. Because I have graduate students to come in my office from time to time feeling overwhelmed, obviously. And the first thing we talk through, have you taken on too much? And often the answer is yes, because there's a lot of places to plug in the department, across campus, and inside and outside the classroom, maybe taking too many courses, et cetera. And so we work through that and seeing if we can think about things, going back to prioritization. What are the must-dos? What are some of the things maybe we can put aside and put on hold for a little while, maybe to the end of the semester? And maybe some of the things we need to stop doing altogether. And just walking through that, I think, really helps. And understanding that prioritization in this time, and be careful of taking on too much during graduate school because it's easy to do.
Thanks, Bill. Would anyone else like to share on that question?
I think I just might add, I agree with everything just said. And I often talk to students about, all right, like, let's think about what's like critical to your professional life, but also like what's feeding your soul and your, I don't actually tell people to give up all their volunteer work or all their, those things may be important to sort of, again, that sustaining piece. But the other thing I would say is that being overwhelmed is really common right now. And I mean, I can tell you, at the start of every fall semester, I am overwhelmed. And I think other people are too. So I've also had to really learn that in these periods of transition, I have to just sort of breathe and wait it out a little bit. And that like I make, lists to myself and I try to figure out how do I get through, but I also have some faith that at least in transitional periods, things when I don't know what's coming, that I will start to understand a little bit more of what my day-to-day life is like and things like that. And so, I also think there's, I agree with Bill, there's times to sort of step back and say, is there too much on the plate? How do I change it up? And then there's times to also just say, I need to let a few things settle and it's gonna come and it's gonna feel better. Once I sort of get through the hump of the transition.
Thank you, Shelley. So, one thing that's coming up in this conversation is the idea that it is possible to get to know people outside your department, to know faculty, to know students, and that's a benefit, that's actually going to enrich your experience here. What advice would you give students in terms of how they can actually make those connections? And in particular, how do they connect with faculty? How do they develop meaningful relationships with faculty that might turn into mentoring relationships?
Well, I'll jump in. I think one immediate way is to take courses, and I think this has been mentioned earlier. And just about every program has an interdisciplinary component where you can take courses outside of your department. So that's one way. I think even in the time of the global pandemic, there are opportunities to attend lectures so going to and speaking, just a plug for the Institute for the Arts and Humanities. There are several events that we'll have coming up this year. And so I hope that to see graduate students attending some of the lectures. And so that might be an opportunity to, if there are interactive components, to at least to see who the faculty are that are there, who are asking questions and so forth. And I know in my department, graduate students, when we would have colloquia, so that's another thing. So formal events like at the IEH, but also departments have colloquia. So attending some of those. And in our department, in the Department of Communication, we have a colloquium series, and students often tell me that they love that kind of engagement, interaction, especially when the faculty start getting into debates about what the speaker is saying and with the speaker and so forth. And so those are ways that you can learn a lot about your faculty. And then finally, there are, Susanna, you and your staff can talk about this more, but there are several graduate student-focused initiatives on campus, like certificates, graduate certificates, and perhaps Angela will talk about this. There's the graduate certificate in participatory research, and that's an opportunity to engage directly with faculty as well. And I mentioned Angela because she is the director of the certificate.
Thank you, Pat.
Could I have one perspective to that, Suzanne?
Please do.
All that stuff Pat said is great, and all those formal activities. I just want to make a plug for the direct one-to-one correspondence with the faculty and cold calling them. I think students are maybe reticent to do that, and I understand that. I think what you shouldn't do is assume that faculty don't have the time to talk to you. You should assume the opposite, that they do have the time to talk to you, and have them say no. If they don't have the time, they'll say no, because they do that. So you should assume that all the faculty at Carolina will make time to talk to you, and I try to do that. So especially somebody who's close to your field, someone who might be on your committee, you want to reach out to them and get in their office one-on-one. Maybe that's another way you can engage faculty, and assume that they're going to say yes. Don't assume they're going to say no. And you get in there, then you have a conversation. That's a way to build relationships, and building those outside of your immediate laboratory, in my case, or whatever your field is. That's really important. And I didn't do that well enough when I went through my training. I was sort of in my lab and my one PI, and I missed an opportunity, right? And so I know now that doing that early on is really important, and practicing those skills of getting out there, making one-on-one connections will be really valuable for you.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, those networking skills are absolutely essential, and a great skill set that you can build by engaging faculty. Another opportunity are the Carolina seminars. There are dozens of them in all kinds of areas, and it's a great opportunity to interact with faculty, students, and staff across disciplines who are talking about critical issues that are emerging in our society. So I highly encourage you to think about that too. The issue of certificates just came up, and we've actually gotten a number of questions about certificates. Students are wondering about certificates, what you see as the value add of certificates, and whether you give students some advice in terms of how and when they might think about applying and joining a certificate program. Would anyone like to take that on?
Could I take that on?
Please do.
Okay. So as Pat mentioned, I'm the new director of the Graduate Certificate in Participatory Research, but I've been on the advisory board for a few years, so I've watched and I've been advising the students in that program for several years. And from my perspective, I think I mentioned I've been at UNC for 5 years, and it's taken about that long for me to feel like I've found my community, and a lot of my community is not in my department. And it's been through graduate, one way is through a graduate certificate program, right? And I think especially for students, this is, if you have an interest that you see that a certificate can cultivate, that maybe transverses your field, it's relevant to your field, but also to several others. That's what these certificate programs are about. They're about sort of knitting together a community of people across campus with a particular interest, and helping you gain the skills and tools you need in that area. So I think it's great both for sort of sharpening the focus of your area of expertise, and also for building community with like-minded folks. And I'm sure the grad school has a list of all the different certificate programs available. Yeah.
Indeed, and I would add that the certificate will, once awarded, will be noted on your transcript as well. So it's another way of documenting to prospective employers that you have accomplished a certain set of skills, that you have certain competencies as well. Would anyone else like to share about certificates? There's another really great question in the chat, and it's kind of a two-parter. And our students are coming to us with a variety of backgrounds. Some are coming directly out of undergraduate. Other folks have been away from formal education for many years and are just now coming back to graduate school. So what advice do you give folks coming from these very, very different places to ensure that they get a good start in graduate school and hopefully are very successful in grad school?
Suzanne, I'll give you just a quick response to that, again, because we're going to share this same response on tomorrow during orientation, particularly for students coming straight out of undergrad. The amount of readings is going to exponentially increase for graduate students compared to undergraduates. So please do not run from it. Embrace those readings. To get the different perspectives on subject matter is extremely important as you move through your career. Going back to the question on what do I research, as you read those different perspectives, you may come across something that's as interesting that all of a sudden talks to you, speaks to you, that will move you down a research path that you may or may not have known about it coming in. And also, as you go through these different perspectives, you'll learn that a lot of these readings have in common. They're all structured the same way. The intro, the lit review, the methodology, the findings and conclusions, etc. So you will learn how to read this academic research, and you'll get better at it as you read more of it. And so please embrace it and be careful not to push it away.
Thanks, Jill.
Can I jump
Angela,
in on that
please.
quickly? I always say that what I learned my first year of graduate school was how to read. Because you come in and you want to read every single word, and you can't, right? And so what you have to figure out, you have to learn different strategies for reading. Like Bill is saying, when do you skim? When do you scan? When do you dig in and read every word? And probably the graduate school or the writing center might have some resources on that, or you could do some Googling, but I think that's the most important skill to master as quickly as possible. And you will with practice.
Can I just add, I think I agree that learning how to read, what to skim, and all that is absolutely critical. I also think that for many people, a transition into graduate school is a transition into a different level of critical thinking and application, and that and that you're, wherever you are in your stage of life, you're bringing something to the table, and you have some way to grow. So you may, if you've come right out of school, for example, you may already be pretty comfortable in a classroom with classroom technologies and all that sort of thing, but you may not have had as much sort of independent responsibilities and that need to sort of be able to see something through to fruition of your own. On the other side, if you're coming back after having been out for a while, you may be nervous about sort of school and things like that, but you are bringing probably work experience or lived experience that is going to help you see material through a different lens. I took 3 years before my master's program and then 8 before my PhD, and I started my PhD with 2 young children, and the lens that I approached training with just changed each of the undergrad, master's, and doctoral, and there was value in all of that. And then there were also challenges. So I think everybody's in the same boat in that we all have something we bring, and we all have ways to grow, and to sort of also avoid too much like self-comparison or feeling like, oh, I'm completely out of my depth because everybody else around me knows what they're doing entirely. I can almost guarantee you that's not the case.
Thanks, Shelley. And I would add that, you know, before you come to graduate school, you're always assessed on whether you've mastered something. And the assessment of mastery before you come to graduate school is typically, do you remember it? When you come to graduate school, the assessment of mastery is, can you apply it? You know, what happens when you take a new situation and you apply the information? Do you know how to do that? And that can be a very challenging transition for graduate students. And so I would say to keep that in mind as you move through your first year of grad school. We've gotten a number of questions about financial support too. And certainly we have some financial support available here in the graduate school. I'm also going to put in a plug for GFIC. It's our Graduate Funding Information Center that has information about external fellowships and scholarships that graduate students can apply for. But I wonder if any of you might want to say a little bit about how graduate students are supported in your departments.
I can speak to this, maybe less about my department, but also about my own experience. I, like Pat Parker, really value public education, and I've been in public institutions my whole life. It wasn't until I was in the 3rd or 4th year of graduate school that I realized what a hustle it is to be in a public institution in grad school compared to a lot of private institutions that have a lot of funding. What I did in grad school that worked well for me, and I think is working well for a lot of our students, is to just really be on the lookout for what are the external funding opportunities in your field. You can get a short list of those probably pretty quickly from advanced graduate students and from your faculty mentors, and look at, figure out when you are eligible for those in your program and get them on your calendar and make sure that you apply. And I think, like Bob said earlier, there's a lot of rejection in academia and in graduate school. Even when you get rejected, you can often ask for feedback from the reviewers. And so you can take it all as constructive feedback to move forward and keep applying.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mhm. We agree with that. And you asked about funding in particular departments, but I think just to sort of underscore what Angela said in the beginning, in public universities and in this public university in particular, it just seems that that graduate students are underfunded. And just saying that aloud and acknowledging that, and you will hear your colleagues, graduate student colleagues, advocate for that, join that advocacy, and know that faculty are advocating for it too, and working to try to change that that is a structural reality. So I wanted to acknowledge that before then delving into, individual strategies that in terms of trying to, to support your graduate, to fund your graduate education. So applying for those external opportunities is one way. In most departments, there's the opportunity to be a research assistant, and so there's a service component that goes along with that. So I would say that sort of the prime opportunities are those that don't have a service opportunity with service commitment rather. And so when you get to that point where you're writing and so forth, you're looking for those external, those funding opportunities that will give you time. And that will carry on throughout your academic career, because that's faculty members are all also looking for funding that will give you time to write and to think, and to have that spaciousness to do good work.
Thanks, Pat. Our time together has gone by so quickly. And again, I want to thank you all for your time and your very thoughtful and frank answers to the questions. And I want to thank Kate for organizing this wonderful session. I wonder if we can go out on maybe kind of a fun question. If you were advising a graduate student or giving them tips on day trips out of Chapel Hill that they might take, what's your favorite day trip out of Chapel Hill?
The beach, going to Riceville Beach, I would say, would be one fun trip.
A lot of state parks. We've just, even in Hillsborough, RDU, et cetera, that a little bit closer, that I thoroughly enjoy being outside.
I do mountain biking and road biking. So for any cyclists out there, spectacular for both road and mountain, and there's lots of new trails going in. So a great day trip is to go find a new trail or even a well-used trail on your mountain bike. So anybody who's interested, send me an email. I'll let you know.
There are a lot of great trails here in Chapel Hill and Durham as well, right? You don't have to go far. I think my favorite day trip is just going about 10 or 15 minutes south of Chapel Hill to the Bynum Bridge. There's really good tubing, or at certain times of year that can be good tubing in the Lower Haw River.
And I was going to echo some of the hiking, in particular in Hillsborough. I like the Okanichi. There's a nice trail up there, and it's less than half an hour away. But I also put in a plug. I don't know if this will sound corporate, but for Mapleview Ice Cream Store, which is about 20 to 30 minutes west of campus. And they have a beautiful vista. You can, get a cone of ice cream and sit out on the lawn and watch the sunset if you're interested. Although you do these days have to be prepared to stand in a little bit of a line.
Thanks, everybody. And I'll throw out Richmond, Virginia, which is 2.5 hours north of here. Great music, great food, and one of the largest art museums on the East Coast. Again, thank you to our faculty panel participants. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your advice. And to all the incoming students, we welcome you to Carolina. We're so excited you're here. Please don't be a stranger to us here in the graduate school. And we look forward to working with you as you work through this next step in your journey. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful day.